And so here's the paradox. Birth control was supposed to liberate women, but in many ways, it's quietly enslaving their biology and especially their nervous systems. Copper is a highly stimulating mineral. It raises sodium and it can create a kind of inner agitation that eventually leads to burnout, adrenal burnout. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Lively Rooted, the podcast. My name is KP Richards. If you do not know me already, I am a holistic health practitioner. I specialize in functional testing, specifically the hair analysis test, which detects mineral imbalances in babies, toddlers, teens, adults. I am not new to the podcasting world. I had my wellness podcast last year and it just didn't feel like the right fit in the right time. I had so many other things going on at the time, and it felt like a chore more than like a guided direction or a path that I felt intuitively I needed to speak on. And so I'm kind of coming back and kind of revamping the podcast. If you'd followed me from previous years, as early as 2018, I had my other podcast that I did with an old friend back then. And I get messages just about every month about if I would ever get back into podcasting and throw my opinions out there. And I am a very opinionated person, for those of you that do know me and you have followed me for a while, and kind of share my thoughts on what's going on in the world. And so when I tried to do my podcast last year, I called it the Copper Dump, specifically to try to touch on the effects of copper toxicity in men, women, and children, right? And so by doing that, my biggest issue is I don't like feeling like I have to stick to one niche. I don't like feeling like I have to be put into a box, because I am the niche, is the way that I view it. And so doing this little revamp is I can kind of speak on any subject that I want to talk on, and it doesn't have to be just about copper toxicity or mineral imbalances or holistic health or anything. It can kind of just be up for discussion for any topic that I feel like I want to yap on about. And so this is kind of where I'm revamping it in that way. Definitely going to be here to untangle the root causes behind modern mental, emotional, and physical health struggles, especially in women and children. I do focus a lot in my practice with pediatrics. I absolutely love working with kids and looking at all of these through the lens of minerals, trauma, biology, and just truth, that some science, because we all know that science isn't always the truth. Science gets paid to advertise or to promote what they are getting paid to promote, right? So it's kind of diving into these different topics on a different level, on a much deeper level, because there's only so much that I can get out on my social media. My TikTok just got hacked. That really put in perspective that my Instagram could get hacked at any moment. I do have my email newsletter with a little over 3,000 of you guys on there, which is a crazy number to think about. So I'm grateful for my email newsletter, but to have a different platform where I can discuss these issues that do hit very close to home for me and that I am very passionate about for helping others with is something that I've needed to have, because like I said, we can only talk so much on Instagram. I can only put out so much content on Instagram before people's attention spans are just focusing on something else. And so this is going to give me that platform to, like I said, dive deeper into those some controversial topics and be able to just kind of really hit close to home and give a different perspective from my view of my research, my time in working with over 200 people at this point, and to be able to really just kind of tap into these topics that I feel are not talked about that much. And so today's episode is going to be starting with something that I believe is silently shaping generations, which is copper toxicity. Now, a lot of people in the wellness space, you might hear one or two things. You might hear somebody who says kind of something that I say, that copper can be toxic to the body under different circumstances. And you might hear somebody else say that copper is not toxic and that we should be consuming as much copper and taking in as many beef liver capsules and raw beef liver that we can every single day. Some people say 3 ounces of raw beef liver a day. I was just chatting with somebody on Instagram who says it's absolutely crazy that some people recommend doing 6 to 8 capsules of beef liver a day, which blows my mind. These people are in it for a rude awakening, in my honest opinion. And so these are kind of the different narratives that you'll hear is, this is toxic, that is toxic. Anything can be toxic to the body in large amounts, right? So the way that we need to view health is not through this black and white lens of thinking of kind of like a textbook definition of toxicity all the time, but it's everything has to be in the right amounts for each body type. And that's going to differ for each of us. My normal, quote unquote normal, I don't like using the word normal, but my normal might be different from your normal. So for me, as somebody who cannot take beef liver right now because I am actively dumping toxic copper from my body, you might be able to take beef liver because you might need it. You actually might be a fast oxidizer who is deficient in copper. And so that's where it kind of comes into, I think a lot of these wellness influencers and those in the wellness space kind of put on these black and white lenses and almost have blinders on and are only looking at one or two things, versus every body is so unique and each body is very individual. And so I don't like saying that necessarily one thing is bad or one thing is good, because we don't know until we look deeper at your biochemistry. And so this is something that I think more people need to take into account, because I'll see people on Instagram or on TikTok just blindly recommending, well, everybody needs to be taking this and everybody needs to be taking this. And while yes, we do need those minerals, we do need those vitamins, not every body is capable of handling the power of that nutrient, because they might not have the foundations built first. They might not have enough potassium for their cells to even be sensitive to open the cell doors to let those nutrients in. They might have gut dysbiosis, they might have mold toxicity, they might have parasites, they might have underlying mineral imbalances that we need to address first before just throwing the body a whole bunch of supplements at once. And so talking about copper toxicity, kind of touching into the history of where I think copper started to become toxic in our society and in our environment, is from the early women's rights movement. So the rise of hormonal birth control and the copper IUD, Margaret Sanger's activism to introduce non-hormonal IUDs or birth control, connecting the dots between the rise of reproductive freedom and the silent mineral imbalances that many women carry today. And so I want to talk about the history and the physiology and why so many people are waking up to their symptoms only recently. So rewinding a little bit, in the early 1900s, women were fighting for liberation. We were fighting for the right to choose, the right to vote, the right to work, the right to their own lives. Margaret Sanger was a key figure in the birth control movement. She advocated for reproductive freedom, and she helped birth the institutions that would eventually become Planned Parenthood. With liberation came science and eventually the hormonal birth control pill in the 1960s. And then later we had the invention of the copper IUD, which was marketed as a hormone-free option for women who didn't tolerate the pill. We were told that birth control would free us, that we would have control over our bodies, our cycles, our choices without side effects. But what they did not tell us is that hormonal birth control and the copper IUD may have handed us a different kind of chain. So if you're not familiar with the copper IUD, it is marketed as a hormone-free, and technically it is. It does not contain synthetic estrogen or progesterone, but just because it's non-hormonal doesn't mean that it's not secretly messing with your hormones. Because when copper is placed inside the uterus, it creates inflammation, and over time, small amounts of copper can enter the bloodstream. Now, I know some people will say, well, that's not enough copper to cause copper toxicity. But when we look at the very deficient diet that we are already consuming and the very high diet in PUFAs, which is those polyunsaturated fatty acids, those also increase estrogen retention and they increase inflammation in the body. Anything that increases copper that we are putting in our body is also going to increase estrogen. Copper is the feminine mineral. It is an estrogen or an estrogenic mineral, right? Whereas zinc is more of that testosterone, mineral, more of the strength, the manpower, the masculine side of the minerals. So we have copper and zinc, known as our hormone ratio, especially on the hair test. And when we look at what the copper IUD does, although it does not contain those synthetic hormones, it is still releasing enough copper in the body for a body that is not tolerating excess estrogen properly, and it can't handle it. And so this looks like constipation. Most women are chronically constipated. Most women have gut issues. Any hormonal IUD is going to deplete vitamin B6. It's going to deplete magnesium, zinc. It could potentially drive up soft tissue calcification. And it's really going to mess with the liver here. And so if we have liver issues, those liver issues lead to constipation. And that constipation leads to toxins getting reabsorbed in the body. And one of those, and not only that, but estrogen can also get reabsorbed in the body. So instead of our bodies releasing that excess estrogen, it is constantly getting reabsorbed and going back into storing in our tissues. This is where we see estrogen dominance. And a lot of women are not connecting the dots between the copper IUD and estrogen dominance because they are told that the copper IUD does not have hormones, so it couldn't potentially give you estrogen dominance. But what we know from a mineral perspective is that without copper, our hormones, without zinc, our hormones would not be produced in the first place. Without minerals, our lives would not be produced. We would not be listening to this podcast. I would not be talking right now without minerals. Hormones are not just created out of thin air, right? They have to be created by something. What are the precursors? The precursors are minerals. And so for some women that have methylation issues, women that are chronically constipated with liver stress, with gut issues, with emotional trauma that they are carrying, who are slow oxidizers, which is a term that we use in the hair analysis world. It essentially means that your body is metabolizing food and nutrients at a slower rate than is required. So you're not producing energy at optimal levels. These people typically are tired all the time. They're cold. The tips of their nose, their hands, their feet are really cold. They might have PMS, PMDD. These people also are prone to thyroid issues like hypothyroidism, gut issues, anything like that. These slow oxidizers, which we can see very clearly whether you are a slow or a fast oxidizer on the hair test, even if you have methylation issues, your body is not clearing copper and that excess estrogen efficiently. So over time, it builds up. It builds up slowly and it builds up quietly. For however long you are on the copper IUD for, or even the hormonal pill, the patch, or the shot, I've had clients that had only been on the copper IUD for less than 6 months, and that was enough time to put them into a huge copper dump and their copper be off the charts at a 4.5 on the hair test, which if you are familiar with reading if you are familiar reading hair tests, you'll know that that's a really big level for copper to be at in the body. What I hear a lot of when I bring this up, especially on TikTok, for whatever reason, it's always TikTok, is people will comment, well, that's just Wilson's disease. It's super rare. You must have only had one client. Well, I've worked with well over 200 clients, and I would say about 98% of them have had a true copper imbalance to where that copper was actually toxic, whether it was a hidden copper toxicity or a overt copper toxicity. I've had just a very small handful of people that were truly copper deficient that actually needed to supplement with copper or beef liver. And so, yes, Wilson's disease can be classified as rare. It's a genetic disorder where copper overload becomes fatal, but you do not need to have Wilson's disease to experience copper toxicity. Your body can be functionally overloaded with copper, meaning that it's stored in your tissues and not being used properly, and that alone can lead to major symptoms like anxiety, rage, OCD, skin issues, hormonal chaos. A lot of people feel like they have a wall built up around them, and that is due to the calcium shell, which I am going to dedicate an episode specifically for the calcium shell and the spiritual aspects of the calcium shell, because the calcium shell is so much more than just soft tissue calcification. There is a spiritual and emotional aspect that needs to be unraveled as well. And so here's where it gets a little bit deeper, diving into the copper issue. When a woman has high copper while pregnant and doesn't detox it or doesn't work on detoxing before she gets pregnant, I recommend my clients to spend at least a minimum of 6 months to prep their body before conceiving. Husband is included. That copper is going to get passed to her baby. And so I see this on hair tests all the time. These children often grow up with symptoms that nobody can explain. The ADHD medications like Ritalin or Adderall, they worked and now they're not working. Symptoms like rage outbursts, anxiety, ADHD, OCD, hormone imbalances by the age of 9. Maybe their daughter is entering puberty at a really young age. Eczema, acne, food intolerances, sleep issues. And it's heartbreaking because it's not the child's fault, it's not the mother's fault, it's not the father's fault. It's the result of a system that handed us copper as quote unquote freedom and never looked at the long-term impact. And so here's the paradox. Birth control was supposed to liberate women, but in many ways, it's quietly enslaving their biology and especially their nervous systems. Copper is a highly stimulating mineral. It raises sodium and it can create a kind of inner agitation that eventually leads to burnout, adrenal burnout. Keep in mind that we need the adrenals to keep copper in motion. Copper has to stay in motion. We need the adrenals to keep copper in motion. But what are most people? Burnt out, tired, fatigued. They have adrenal fatigue. We could see that clearly on a hair test as well. Women feel anxious, wired, depleted, weepy, but they push through because we're told that we should be strong, independent, and empowered. And we also live in a society that caters to the men's biological clock rather than a woman's, because remember, men's hormones operate on a 24-hour cycle. They don't operate on a 28 to 30-day cycle the way that women do. Women follow the lunar cycle. We follow the moon cycle. And so because of this, their bodies are silently screaming for relief. And something else to touch on is that we have been taught since we were very young to take a pill for something to fix it. You have a headache, here's some Aleve. You have a toothache, go take some Tylenol. You have a tummy ache, here's some Pepto-Bismol. You don't know what's wrong with you, you're having period cramps, go to the doctor, they'll write you a prescription for any type of birth control that you could ask for. You can pretty much ask for it and they will write you a prescription. You're anxious, you're depressed, go get a prescription, go get on an SSRI, an antidepressant. So rather than sitting with our feelings, sitting with our pain, and tapping into our truest state of ourself, we're going to somebody else to tell us what's wrong with us who can't ever put the pieces together because it's all about money. They write you a prescription and they just made their money for the entire month. And then they're going to see somebody else after you and after them and after them. And it's kind of like climbing down, or I guess climbing up the corporate ladder in a sense, or I guess I should say the pharmaceutical company's ladder. Because as they keep climbing, one patient falls off the ladder, but they're constantly stepping up and stepping up and stepping up to get another paycheck, to get another paycheck, to get another paycheck at the expense of your own health. Because they don't care at the end of the day that birth control is causing all of these issues. They're not even trained enough hours in nutrition to understand how minerals work from synthetic hormones or from copper. It's up to people call us the quacks to come in and to educate. Doctor means teacher. Don't forget that doctor means teacher. Doctor does not mean prescriber. To educate how to live a healthy, nutritious life the way that God intended. We're not living the way that God intended, and this is why a lot of us are in the mess that we are in, because rather than going to God for our issues, which I'm guilty of it, still guilty of it, we're all sinners, we repent, we should, rather than going to God for our issues to tell us how do we heal, because this is something else that I think some Christians struggle with, is sometimes we think that we can pray and ask and receive, which we can. I do believe in the power of prayer, and sometimes we are God's favorites and we magically get healed. And there are people, cancer survivors, children, that magically, that they have a story that only you would believe if you believed in God because of the way that they healed, and it's amazing. And it's a miracle, I guess I should say. But for some of us, I truly think that God wants us to use our story and our voice to help other people, our testimony to help other people that He created along the way. And so what this looks like is asking God for healing, and asking God for not only healing, but direction of how to heal the way He wants us to. This looks like nutrition changes. This looks like lifestyle changes. This looks like getting over gluttony, which a lot of people in this world struggle with gluttony, and it's not talked about. I rarely ever see even pastors preach on gluttony. There will be another episode dedicated to this. I was doing a whole series on gluttony on my TikTok before I got banned. This looks like mineral balancing. This looks like prayer. It looks like meditation. It looks like quiet time. It looks like these things that we are told in this hectic society that we live in to not focus on, because we are always in a go society and make money society, and not about praising God and living according to His plan and His divine will, right? This episode isn't a condemnation of women who choose birth control, but it's a wake-up call about what we were not told. A lot of women were not told that birth control is going to do this to your body, that birth control could potentially cause infertility, that birth control would impact your mental health so bad, and especially adding in copper on top of it, where we are already depleted. Our soil is depleted of very essential nutrients like phosphorus, magnesium, zinc, boron, and then we have fortified foods, which contain iron, vitamin D, calcium, and sometimes copper, all of those that are antagonists of those calming minerals for behavior and mental health and brain development, hormone production, neurotransmitter production. And now we also add in PUFAs, which came out in the 1970s, which I'll probably do a whole episode dedicated on PUFAs, driving up inflammation, driving up estrogenic retention. And so we have all of these things that have led to a very deficient individuals, I should say, and then adding birth control on top of it really doesn't help. So it's not about fear, because I know some people will say, you're fear-mongering. It's not about fear, but it's about awareness. And awareness comes from action. So until we can be aware of what something is doing to our bodies and to our society of women and children, so that we don't keep passing down the generational curse of copper toxicity, like I like to call it, is we have to bring awareness to the issue to begin with. But starting with awareness is how we are going to rewrite the narrative for our children. For our children, if you have not had children yet, for our grandchildren, for our great-grandchildren, because it's not just about us, it's about our daughters, our future babies, our families, and this work is generational. Something else to keep in mind here is a lot of us can so easily fall victim to anything that might have happened to us, whether it be pharmaceutically induced, antibiotically induced, in this case, birth control induced rage, induced PMDD, induced PCOS, induced endometriosis, induced fertility or infertility, I should say. It's easy to kind of sink into this victim mindset of, well, I have birth control, or I took birth control and now I have estrogen dominance and I have PMDD and I'm just never going to get better. And it's so easy to say, I have this. You are not your diagnosis. And that's something that I think a lot of people forget because it's easy to. You're not your diagnosis. And so as soon as you detach you from your diagnosis, you can better heal. You can kind of look at the lens of the world a little bit better. There's nothing inherently wrong with you. There's just some physiological things that you have to fix, biochemical things that you have to fix, that you can make those tweaks to once you figure out what tweaks need to be made, whether it's through bioresonance testing, Dutch testing, HTMA testing, GI map testing, your stool test, whether it's even through blood work. And you can be able to start making those tweaks, those biochemical tweaks, because you've been handed a story that doesn't serve you, but now you get to rewrite a new one. And so that's what people need to keep in the back of your mind, is if you are somebody that so easily, and I'm right there with you, I told myself that I had endometriosis for years because I was diagnosed at 18 and that there was nothing I could do. I was always going to have PMDD. I was always going to have really painful periods. And now I'm going on 2 years of having maybe less than 5 painful periods a year. It depends on my stress level that month. It depends on grief. It depends on loss. It depends on other factors. It depends on how I was nutritionally showing up for my body, how I was showing up for my nervous system that month. But I've been going on 2, almost 3 years now of painless periods. Periods that didn't include PMDD rage, PMDD anger outbursts, anxiety, depression, to where you just want to sink into a hole the 2 weeks before your period. OBGYNs told me that I would never experience that in my life. And now that I have, it's crazy to look back on that I told myself that I would never have that until I released those feelings first and that attachment. Because I am not endometriosis and I am not PMDD. I am me. And so that's what I want so many other women to kind of keep in mind, is to detach from that diagnosis. Maybe having a diagnosis has been helpful for you. I think that there are cases of having a diagnosis can be really helpful because now you can pinpoint what areas to focus on and what areas to look at a little bit more, and how to nutritionally support your body and spiritually support your body more. But at the end of the day, you are not your diagnosis. And so rewriting and reframing that narrative is going to help so many of you if you have been recently diagnosed with PCOS, infertility, endometriosis, SIBO, a mental health issue. Whatever your story is, know that you don't have to go by that for the rest of your life. You are you, and you are not a diagnosis. If this episode stirred something in you, I want you to know you are not alone. If you are comfortable to share your stories, share your stories. And I might start a little question box or some stories that I'll share at the end of the episode to let other women know that you're not alone. You're not alone in birth control-induced anxiety or mental health symptoms or PMDD or endo or PCOS or whatever the case may be. So many women have been impacted by birth control and have gone into it blindly because, again, we're not told all of these things that birth control could impact. We're not told the side effects. We're not given the package insert unless we ask for it. And most people don't even know what a package insert is. Episode 2 is going to be a really good episode with Dr. Rick Malter. We're going to talk about copper toxic women and the mineral imbalances that he has seen working with women, that I have seen working with women, and really kind of get into that deeper discussion of copper toxicity in pregnancy, in postpartum, in the perinatal stage as well. So I'm excited for you guys to listen to that, and I will see you for episode 2.